one of the very first organic farms in Nebraska. So he's always been a mentor and a wise person with great perspective. So I am super thrilled to introduce to you today Dave Vetter of the Grain Place.
She said I was supposed to tell you about a little bit about me, and the simplest way to do that is to tell you that I'm the old guy in the room. So we've got some points on the slide here. I don't remember what's on here.
All right, there we
Dave,
go. We'll do it together.
Okay. Our foundation that we put together several years ago, we've been trying to work on organization and some basic presentation stuff that we can do, and we're beginning to get that organized, and there's a basic set of principles that we want to talk about all the time, and so that's what we're going to list here. So we believe if we take care of the soil, it will take care of us. We believe that the most important livestock on the farm is in the soil, and we believe that soil, plant, animal, ecosystem, and community health is part of a single holistic system. And we believe this enough that we're willing to be different. And as some of my neighbors would say, just plain odd. But so, in putting these principles into action, regenerative and organic certified farming system. So we were first certified by a private third-party organization, first part of the farm in 1977, and the whole farm in 1978. We have put together a 9-year rotation that increases diversity below and above the ground and integrates livestock. The other thing we tried to do with the rotation and how we divided the farm up for the rotation was to increase the diversity across the landscape of the farm.
Maybe you can explain that map there.
Oh, maybe I might be able to.
I bet you can.
The map there at the top is the layout of the fields on the farm. We have 18 fields that average approximately 12 acres apiece, and those are 2 cycles of our 9-year rotation in those fields. The fields on the north part of the farm are a little bit smaller than those on the south, and we divided it up so we had approximately equal acres of each crop each year. It took us, just in laying that out, it took us 2 years to figure out what the rotation should be in order to pay the bills. And then we spent another 2 years about figuring out how to introduce that rotation and change the existing rotation so that we could maintain our organic certification. And so it's a puzzle. It's not real easy to figure out just looking at it. So, and it takes a lot more work, by the way. It's a lot easier to farm a 40-acre field than it is 3 12-acre fields. And we continue to do variety trials and research on that, and then we are doing some other research projects relating to small rotation changes or the introductions of new crops. Not much of that. We have not done much of that in the last few years. We got a program going now where we're trying to train new farmers and new farm managers, and that is proving to be the most difficult thing we've tried to tackle. So we strive to provide structured and unstructured on-farm educational opportunities. We've done a lot of tours with classes from the university, from high schools, from some elementary schools, from some homeschool groups, and tour groups from other universities and international representatives on behalf of the State Department. And we try to provide example of regenerative and organic end-to-end food chain stuff. That's development of the processing facility that's now located on the farm. And we do manufacturing and contract cleaning and processing work. We do private label work, and we've worked with a number of companies on new product development. That's the part that I really enjoy, but that my daughter, who says I need to pay more attention to stuff that actually makes money. And we have tried to work as an advocate for regenerative and organic agriculture over the years. I've spent a lot of time lobbying in DC, and if you paid much attention, you know we're not very effective. But you have to keep talking to them, or you don't get anywhere. And we're hoping that we're developing and demonstrating the value it is to the farms and to our local communities. One of the things that I've appreciated most, especially in the early years of our transition, was that I employed a lot of young people from our community. And it's interesting now that some of those people that worked for us, for instance, one young woman that worked for us in junior high helped take care of my wife when she was in memory care. And the other one now is a landowner next door, and he's cooperated with us on some research stuff. So that has really, that's been important to me. So we have folks that are familiar with what we've been doing now scattered all over the country just because they put in a few hours walking beans or making hay. So, and water management and development of healthy soil helps to absorb water. One of the pieces, have any of you seen the film? There's a piece in there when we've just gone through a 6-inch rain in about 20 minutes, and the fact that we absorbed it all. And I had been dealing with the editor of the local newspaper. I think David mentioned that in his presentation earlier. And we got coverage about events and stuff. We hosted at the farm. And he was always polite about it, but I think was skeptical all the time. But after that film was shown in town, he came up to me afterwards and he just said, "Now I get it." So that was pretty nice. So, and then, and opposed to the greater community, we saw a tremendous increase in wildlife, and we're losing that now that we're losing all of our trees. We followed the recommendation of the state forester, and he wasn't thinking very far ahead about climate change. And so that's impacted a lot of our, all of our tree borders, and then even that's had an impact on our grass borders that we also use. So we're not seeing as much wildlife activity now, and I'm kind of anxious to get more trees in the ground. So, but, and it is a whole way of thinking. As a friend of mine always said, that conversion is more difficult between the ears than it is on the farm. And when I was finishing up my work in graduate school, I came to realize that we could not treat other people with justice until we treated the soil or our earth ecology with justice. And that was the real incentive for us to begin doing what we did on the farm. So that kind of gives you a summary of that. In terms of the thought process, there's a couple of things that I'd like to mention that I think illustrate that a little bit. When I started back at the farm, I didn't have any money. I had to borrow everything to start. So as you can imagine, those first few years, the management for cash was number one. And so I sold hay quite a bit, and I do not sell hay anymore. You sell more nutrients off the farm with hay than just about anything else you do. And I don't like to do that, and it was pretty hard to do it then. But we had a lot of hay one year, And I was having trouble selling it, and the price kept going down all around us. And so rather than sell it and take that loss, I hauled it back out on the field where I got it and spread it out. And I'm pretty sure that I had a number of neighbors know by that time that I'd actually gone over the edge. So, but that was part of the decision-making process about how we do that and how we keep those principles in mind when we're doing that. Because the value of that back into the soil, not only in terms of nutrients, but biomass, was significant, and it was important not only for that coming season, but the next 2 or 3. So those were the kind of things that we look at, and trying to keep in mind always about what we do today. How's that going to impact us next year, 10 years? I once told an early meeting or conference of what is now NSAS, I think it was back in the very early 80s, that we should be thinking 100 years ahead. And I got a lot of weird looks at that when I said that, but I still believe that we need to be doing that. And so we need to focus on the health of the soil, the whole ecosystem. Another piece that I have observed just in the last 2 or 3 years, we had rain, a lot of it. We had 1.5 inches on Wednesday. We had 1.5 inches on Thursday. We had 1.5 inches on Friday, and it started raining again Saturday morning about 5 o'clock. And by 9, we already had 1.5 inches. And we were moving cattle from the far end of the farm clear over to the other side. We moved them, and we were headed back down in our little Ranger to pick up the mineral tub and stuff that we move along with them. And we come back by the rain gauge on the way, and that was about 9:30. We'd already had 1.5 inches. And when we went down the hill, it just started pouring. We couldn't hardly see anything. And the water running out of that pasture was running out about that deep and right into the floor of the Ranger, but it was crystal clear. I could see the texture of the soil surface through that where the cattle had been grazing. With 2 fields, we had just in the drainage, that's the main drainage through the farm, and the 2 fields on each side, we just got done irrigating them before it started raining. And the water was running out of the furrows like mad, and it was all clear. And it made me wonder what would happen if the entire watershed was managed along that same set of principles, that perhaps in another 40 to 50 years that the Blue River could run blue again. And I think that kind of thing is possible. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen in a generation. So at that point, questions? Every situation and context is so different that what was something that I learned or didn't work may not fit, but the principles are still all the same.
What kind
Yes?
of trees are you going to put in when you replace the other trees?
I don't know yet, but it'll be a lot of different kinds.
Anything fast growing or just going for?
I'm not particularly interested in fast growing. I want something that's going to last a while. I want something that'll be there for somebody to build a house out of in 150 years.
What kind of trees do you have there now?
Dead ones.
Yeah.
So, mostly, they were mostly pines, and the #1 recommendation we got for planting was Scotch, and the Scotch pine has been the most vulnerable to the borers. So, and we had some Austrian, which has stood up much better, but the ones that have stood up and handled it the best and are still the most viable were the lodgepole pine. So, we'll continue to put some pines into the mix, but we'll focus a lot more on hardwoods. So,
But most of what was there was pines.
yes,
Was there.
yep. I mean, that outside border, that was primarily all that we planted, along with a number of shrubs. When we did those main tree planting in the early 80s, we planted over 3,000 trees that year. And And they were all hand watered for the first 2 to 3 years.
Do you have beekeeping and bird watching on your farm?
We used to do bird watching groups, but since our trees have all died, the bird populations have really come down. And so we're not doing that. My brother-in-law kept bees, and he finally gave up and quit. But the fact that he's 75 also had a bit to do with it. So, but he lost, I think the last 10 years, he lost all of his bees every year. And in the 90s, when they were using pen cap, the bees, the dead bees at the hive, were so bad that you could smell them from the plant, and they were probably about 500 yards away. So.
Can you talk a little bit more about your internship that you're now doing?
Ask him.
Yeah, and
So,
I'm David Meyer. I'm on the
sorry.
foundation and around the farm. And so we do what we call more official internships, where it's your typical 6 to 7, 8 weeks during the summer, bringing the high school, or I'm sorry, the college kids. Or we do the experiential learning, where maybe somebody comes in for 3 to 4 days. But the whole idea is just to get them onto the farm. And so what we try and do is, when we bring somebody in, especially if they're going to be in there for multiple months, the first thing we say, you're going to spend a lot of time working on the farm, because this is a working internship. So like 70% of your time will be following Adam and the other farm around, doing the chores, doing what needs to be done on the farm. So it's really important they learn what it feels like to be on a working farm. But the other 30% of their time is kind of up to them, what their passions are. So usually, no matter what they're passionate about, we can tie it back to the farm. And so we try and create that 30% time for them to follow their passions. And it's been really good, and as many of you know who's been around internships, it's always like a breath of fresh air, people coming in all excited and enthused, and you end up learning probably more from them than they do from us. So we try very hard to work for that win-win situation.
So keeping it that short, do you feel like that is easier to have a positive experience? Or like, what made you decide to do a shorter stint?
So it was a combination of things. A lot of it is just the time they have and the money we have to support the intern. But we do longer ones. This year, for example, I think we're going to go more in that almost 3 months, right? Because that fits what that person wants to do. So we try and create and customize the internship as much as possible. And we are fortunate enough, through some funding through Harrison Seeds, that we have an intern house on the property where they could live.
one other thing that's I really like, the fact that our very first intern is now a member of our board. And she just received her master's degree in sustainable food systems. And she works with Kathleen Merrigan at the Sweat Center at Arizona State.
David, you made mention of the film. There may be a few in here that didn't realize you're mentioning Dreaming of a Better World is the name of the film that goes fairly in-depth onto the background of the farm and on some of the motivations for David to put himself through this for so long. Really beautifully done film. Bonnie Hawthorne's an incredibly gifted filmmaker, and the Grain Place Foundation is fortunate to now own that film and be able to put it out there for folks. And it is as simple as remembering that it's called Dreaming of a Better World. Pop that into a search engine. You'll get to a link in a hurry and be able to watch the film for free online.
Or if you want to, you can go onto our website. That's showing right up here, and then you just scroll down, and it's basically you're right there saying, watch the movie. And it's as easy as that. So lots of different ways to get to it.
The number two thing I'd bring up, David, a lot of you may know, the Department of Agriculture has recently committed itself to regenerative agriculture again through their regenerative pilot program. They're calling it $700 million put towards supporting regenerative ag practices on farms. through the EQIP program and the Conservation Stewardship program, EQIP and CSP. For 2026, I'll tell you, you've already missed the cutoff deadline for funding. But if you're at all interested in that sort of approach to supporting some initiatives on your farm, now is the time to get into field offices and make sure that people understand that this is stuff you care about and that you want some help figuring out how this is how regenerative ag is gonna be reality for, regions around our whole country. So any of your local field offices would be able to still take an application from you because the application process is revolving year round. It's just then there's also ranking and funding periods. So you've missed the funding period for 2026, but I'm telling you, challenge those resource conservationists in the field offices that this is something you care about.
Yes.
I'm curious about if I'm able to call myself regenerative. What comes with that? Is there a seal or a certification?
Well, it depends. There's a number of programs labeled regenerative, and they all have a little bit different approach to it. My own opinion is that organic done well is regenerative.
Right.
A lot of it's not done well, but yeah. So
Is there going to be where the government's going to come in again, the USDA, and develop something like the NOP for the regenerative people?
I doubt it,
You don't-
and we're probably better off if they don't.
Yeah.
So
There's been a lot of talk for the last 4 to 5 years, the large food companies trying to see, is it viable to have this regeneratively produced products on their shelf, right? And some have tried it out, and the thinking after 5 years, we still don't know if that's a viable thing or not, right? They're just still trying to figure that out. And as Dave mentioned, there are hundreds of different descriptions for what is regenerative. But the good thing is, no matter how you have your very distinct description, they all follow like the 5 same principles that bring that to life.
So they all have to follow the 5 principles. Like, how do I verify that? I've seen cinnamon, okay, for example, with a regenerative organic label on it. There is an Frontier sells some.
if there is a regenerative organic, that is a formal certification program, and it's an add-on to the NOP program, and it requires a whole thing on livestock, and it requires another on figure out all the pieces here, social justice, and one on livestock deals with animal welfare, and they're going to expect that all the employees under those operations on the social justice piece are being paid a living wage.
Oh, yeah,
And,
that's another
yep,
So
and
that's a certification.
and then the other one, you have to demonstrate improvement in soil health.
And you get that through your organic certifiers?
They have a whole list of there's a limited list of certification organizations that are also authorized to do the regenerative, and that's through the Regenerative Organic Alliance.
And who oversees them?
That board that's independent of the federal government, and but that's the whole list there, and they have an independent board then that oversees the function of that certification program. And yeah, it's an interesting process. We were a pilot for the first go around of that, and we're not going to renew. And it's because of the cost. It is expensive, and I'm not sure, but I think Adam would prefer that I pay him instead of them.
Do you foresee the organic certification adding those 5 layers into there?
Actually, they are there, but they're not, there's little focus on them.
Well, so the audit trail isn't as strong or,
Or the audit trail would be the same, as actually more detailed than what the NOP program is.
but would those 5 go into the organic system plan or organic?
They have to have the NOP plan before they're even eligible.
Right.
So anything that's in the NOP, they have to meet that just to be eligible to apply for the other one.
But will someday all of it be one?
I doubt it.
That was just my hope.
I doubt it.
And it's so confusing now because you have that separate push to have just a regenerative label all by
Right,
itself.
Yeah.
And what exists now is regenerative organic, and it just is causing a lot of confusion.
Yep.
People like to do that to themselves.
So,
I believe that the ROC, Regenerative Organic, wasn't that based off of the Rodale Institute, kind of the parameters that they set?
actually, program was put together by an exploratory board of which I was a member, and that included a whole group of us. I was on that. Will Harris was a part of that, and Dr. Bronner's and Patagonia were a big part of that. And the primary funding behind that came from Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's, and the Rodale Institute. And a lot of that was leveraged off of the work of Robert Rodale way back when. And, you know, he's the first one that started to regularly use healthy soil, healthy food, healthy people. So that's the root of where that whole concept came from.
So,
Just-
Dave, did you see any added premiums beyond the organic when you were certified with organic? You said it was costly, but were you getting any kind of premium added?
No, and I need to qualify that a little bit. What I do with my organic production is in a very high-end small niche. So I probably got paid better than those with ROC on that. For the market, I don't need that. But that doesn't mean I might find it useful someday.
How many more hoops to jump through were there, and how much more paperwork?
The paperwork is more, they require on-farm, in-field, simple soil health assessments. And being able to do that, I looked at some crews that I had do that back, 3 years ago or so, and it suggests that they take a look and do these soil health parameters, that there's 10 items. And in a field, they want you to pick what you think is the best and what you think is the poorest and what you think is average, and look at that. When I saw the results of those, when my crew did that, it was clear they didn't have any idea what they were looking at. So the one that had the best set of numbers on that was the one they thought was the poorest. So, you know, but they were all inexperienced, so, and that's going to make a difference.
Do you see in the next 5 years a more higher demand, consumer demand for the regenerative?
I don't know. It is increasing. The growth has been pretty significant this last year. For the regenerative certified on the organic side, sales were up 30-some% this last year. And there's more and more companies signing on to that. I think there's now 105 different brands that are using the regenerative organic seal. So the growth is there, at least right now, short term. You know, a growth of 30% is pretty easy when there's only 10. Those are not real numbers, by the way. They are quite a bit higher than that. But so we'll see more rapid growth in the very short term than you will see in the long term. And we've seen that same way since the NOP came into place as well. Yes.
What's your advice for guys that are, corn, soybean farmers looking to do something of different than that? Is it basically get out there and make your own market? You know, kind of what you've done?
Right now, we're importing close to 60% of the organic soybeans used in the U.S. So there's some significant opportunity there. I am skeptical of some of those supply chains. And we make it a point when we need to buy beans to buy domestic and do that just because of that. And I don't know, corn is a different issue. Again, it's the imports that are going to impact the price. But when all those tariffs hit, we saw an uptick in the price of organic corn. And we buy organic corn, but we need a high-end food grade. So right now what we're buying, we're paying 10.5 delivered. And the basic market on the feed side right now is probably anywhere from about 7.25 to 8.5. But most of the samples we get, I wouldn't buy anyway, because the quality issue is not there. But I need a high quality dry milling corn. And I'm asking for it to be drier than people like to market it on. So I feel like that warrants some extra price too. So
What makes the biggest difference in the quality? Is it the hybrid?
well, the basic characteristics are dependent upon the hybrid. So there's quite a difference in dry milling corns. And so for the variety that we're using right now, we got an industrial, I think it was ADM analysis as a dry milling quality that did that. So that's kind of what we've been going by. And we're still trying to find a replacement for it. Our vendor quit producing the seed. So we're trying to find out. We bought all they had last year, so we got enough for another crop. But it's been the standard for us for almost 15 years. And it's consistently the best yielder. I think there's only twice we had a test product against it that out-yielded more, but it didn't have as good a quality. And we try to select hybrids based on what we know our end use is going to be. If you can find that kind of a steady market, that's the one you want to get into, because you can be steady pricing. I have farmers that have grown a specialty millet for us, and we've been at the same price for 10 years. We just increased it 10% 2 years ago. But I think all but 2 years in that period, and that was from early 2000s until 3 years ago, there was only 2 years when a regular millet was priced higher than it. Most of the time we were 50 to 60% above. And so that steady supply, that's a steady supply for us, steady price for our customer, and a very good market for the grower. Delivery, it's adequate. It radically goes up and down. We may take 2 loads 1 month, and we may not take another one for 6 months. But when we make a contract for that, we will take it all. And so storage flexibility is a must on those kinds of arrangements. But the farmers that I've worked with that have been the most successful on the marketing side are those that have made long-term commitments at a fairly uniform price. And you're going to come out on the short end once in a while, but on the average, you'll gain a lot. You know what you can count on, our customers know, and we know what we can count on. And that has value. I run into another thing recently, and I was thinking about that and about the environmental health and stuff. So I was visiting with a friend in the early 80s, and we were sitting on the banks of the Kentucky River and watching that. The willows along the creek and the vegetations along the river were amazing. Birds were birds all over the place. You could see the fish moving in the water. And I stopped to visit again recently. It was dead. There's no vegetation along the creek banks. The river is full of algae and whatever else it might be, and it just looked like a dead river, and probably pretty much was. But that's what, and my suspicion is that most of that's agriculture related. And that is not what we like. So, and that was really disappointed. I really enjoyed that visit on the banks of the river about 40-some years ago. It was not nearly as pleasant this fall.
Have you seen any water, like springs that weren't there before appearing? Have you seen any like water changes on the property?
I have never seen any sign of a spring
Okay,
on the property.
a river or a creek on your property?
Well, we're at the very top of the watershed, and the first marked bridge on the highway was about a half a mile from our driveway south, but went through the corner of the neighbor's field. So we're on the very top of the watershed. And we're 4.5 miles from the Platte River, but we're in the Blue River watershed, so the upper Big Blue. So that's why I thought maybe we could see the water run blue again.
Right, well, and see, you're doing your part.
So I don't know if we'll get there, but it was really nice to see clear water running out of my fields after all that rain. And somebody else have a question back here? Okay.
So what do you tell producers or farmers when they say, Dave, you have a really neat, complicated rotation, and that's really cool. What kind of rotation should I set up on my farm?
That's not a question I can answer. That's something you have to figure out for yourself. I would suggest that if any one of you were to take over operation of a farm, it would probably have to change. And that's something that Adams may have to deal with in a few years when I disappear. And because I think it's that individual. The rotation, when my brother-in-law was the farm manager, we developed this rotation together. We really saw on those big principles the same in the basic solution. But how we managed that rotation in process, our approaches were different. And certain things were important to him and others were important to me, and they were in conflict. But it did not take long for me to realize that if it was going to work, I had to let him do it his way. And it worked, and it worked really well. But that's not to say my way wouldn't have worked just as well. But if the things that it takes to make the system work, it's key things. The ones that are important to you are the ones that are going to get done. The ones that are important to somebody else are going to get put on the back burner. And so I think that's a very personal thing, and that changes with the individual that's managing the resource. And there are so many variables that go into figuring this out that there are no recipes.
Any other questions? We have some time left, but.
So I guess I'll ask it. So you've been doing this for 2 generations with counting your dad, right? And so if somebody says to you, what's the biggest 1 or 2 things you've learned over those 2 generations with your dad and you, what would you say?
Number 1, don't be afraid to make mistakes, even big ones, because that's what you learn from. And I don't mind paying for those mistakes that we make. What I really don't like is having to pay for other people's mistakes. And we've had a number of those that have directly impacted the functioning of our operations. So, especially when we had our subsurface drip irrigation system set up.
Interesting. That didn't work?
Let's put it this way. We had 2 different companies when we put the 2 systems in, and what we didn't know at the time we signed the contract, they'd never done one before. And we learned a lot from the first one that we made recommendations and a request to on the second one, and they ignored them all. we've had problems with both. But, so,
Those are hard lessons.
so, little things like that turn out to be big things. So, yeah. The other one for us, starting back when we did 50 years ago, or restarting again, was all the speculation, the social issues around us being so different from everybody else. That was an issue. We almost wished that some of the really experimenting stuff that we'd done all out by the highway, so everybody could see the same thing. But I had an uncle that retired, so he was in the coffee shop where all of the old farmers and stuff were there and listening, and he would report back to us. And it was really interesting, some of the things we were doing that we didn't know about. So that, and in looking back on it, early on we figured out that our biggest failure was not figuring out how to invoice for our entertainment value at the coffee shop. But, but anyway.
Well, make sure to fill out your application or your reviews, and if anyone has any other questions, we are so grateful to you, Dave.
Thank you.